Okay, so now we're going to talk about the correct temperatures to cook our foods to. And so you will be looking at a sheet of paper that looks like this. It says cooking requirements up at the top of it. Okay, and so if you get really overwhelmed with all of the numbers, I want to try to break this down so that you can think about it logically. And another thing that I tell people is I know some really good chefs, great chefs, experienced chefs who cannot rattle these numbers off the top of their heads. And so if you need to, post them somewhere, make a card and put it in your pocket so that when you are in the kitchen, these become a little more commonplace for you and you become more comfortable with them. So we're going to start at the bottom of the page and we're going to move our way up. So you'll notice that we are cooking food at the bare minimum to 135 degrees. And if you remember, that's because we are getting it out of the danger zone. And the danger zone is 41 degrees to 135 degrees. We are avoiding those temperatures because that is where bacteria grows the most. And obviously, we don't want to encourage that. So let's look at the bottom. 135 degrees. Now, in your book, you will notice that they have requirements for how long you need to maintain that temperature. So if you put your thermometer into whatever it is, your soup or your chicken or your lasagna, it needs to be able to withhold that temperature for a certain amount of time. And we're going to look at those times for each of the temperatures. But I'm going to tell you guys that this is probably, if you're feeling overwhelmed, this is secondary. So your primary concern right now is to memorize the temperatures. Once you get a good handle on that, then you can start looking at the duration or the time for those. And there's a good chance that you won't see a question about this on your test. I'm not guaranteeing it, but they are not going to focus on that as much as they are on the temperatures. You will have multiple questions on your test about temperatures, minimum temperatures for cooking foods. Okay, so for 135 degrees, we are cooking foods, and you'll see the list: fruits, veggies, grains, which include pastas and rice, and legumes, which are beans. Now, what I like to think about this is that those are all foods that I would eat raw. Now, I wouldn't necessarily enjoy eating pasta raw, but I also wouldn't be concerned about it being dangerous. And so that's a super easy thing to remember. If it is safe to eat raw, then it just needs to come out of the danger zone up to 135 degrees. Okay, now we are only going to jump 10 degrees for each of these. So after I do 135 degrees, I'm going to jump up to 145 degrees. And you'll notice that this one, you're going to maintain for 15 seconds. So you put your thermometer in the food, maintain 145 degrees with that thermometer for 15 seconds. And let's look at the foods on here, and then we'll talk about why it logically makes sense. Okay, so we've got seafood, we've got steaks, chops of pork, beef, veal, and lamb. And then we also have game. Now, I want you to notice that eggs are served immediately if they are cooked to 145 degrees. You'll notice if you jump up to the next section to 155 degrees, eggs are served at 155 degrees if they are held. So if you've got a buffet line. Now, this is because people who have done scientific research, they've examined how much bacteria growth is on foods for durations. They know that eggs, the longer they sit, the higher chance they have of developing growths of bacteria. And so if you're serving them immediately, then you just need to get them to 145 degrees. And then seafood, if you've been in the kitchen long enough, you know that seafood cooks really quickly. You overcook it. If you overcook shrimp, you overcook a variety of seafood, it's going to get chewy, it's not going to taste good, and it's not necessary. And then when we talk about steaks, a variety of steaks, we know also that our concern for bacteria is mostly with foods that have gone through machinery and have had more contact with hands. And so ground beef, ground chicken, well, we won't talk about chicken yet, but ground beef, ground veal, ground lamb, all of those things are more concerning if when they are ground. So if it's a steak, when we're cooking it, we're searing it on the outside. That is where the bacteria is most prevalent, and we are taking care of that by cooking it to 145 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to jump up 10 more degrees to 155 degrees, and you'll notice that this one you're holding for 17 seconds. So you can kind of also pay attention to, no, there's 0 minimum time for 135 degrees, 15 seconds for 145 degrees, and 17 seconds for 155 degrees. And if you notice on here, it makes sense that we're cooking these foods to higher temperatures because they're ground. So we've got our hamburgers that are ground, we've got pork that's ground. We're not talking about poultry yet. We've also included ground seafood in this list as well. And then also our eggs that are being held. Okay, so let's jump up another 10 degrees to the very top of our temperatures to 165 degrees. And for this one, as soon as your thermometer reads 165 degrees, you're good. That is just the minimum time that it needs to hold for. Okay, poultry. Poultry is our most concerning type of meat. It carries the most bacteria, and so that's why we are making sure that we cook this the most, 165 degrees. Now, you know that if you've worked with duck, that you have some variances available for that because we don't cook duck to 165 degrees. You also notice that stuffing, if it's made with any type of fish, meat, or poultry, you can think of, you've got your lasagnas that are stuffed, you've got actual stuffing, you've got stuffed shells, all of these different things that we need to make sure we get to 165 degrees. And then if you have a dish that includes some previously cooked temperature controlled foods, then you need to make sure that you bring those up to 165 degrees. So we are just being extra cautious with those as well. All right, so to recap, you've got 4 different temperatures you need to be aware of. And you can think about this logically from the lowest temperatures right out of the danger zone, what foods I feel safe eating at the lowest, and then going all the way up to the highest temperatures that we need to cook our foods to, and why it makes sense that poultry would be at the top of that, and stuffing and things like that. All right.